Welcome, friends. My name is Cami Bushman. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I am passionate about progress, specifically eternal progress. So, on this channel, we are going to be talking about principles that are going to empower us to progress, both in this life and in the next. So what is the point? We all know there's lots of podcasts, YouTube channels out there. I found personally that some of them have been very helpful and a few have been just noise, right? So why another channel? What's the point? And what I feel inspired to do here in my own life, as well as hopefully helping a few of you out there as well, is to increase my spiritual momentum and ultimately be prepared. So the question is then, what are we preparing for? I think President Nelson has a good answer for us here. Obviously, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so a lot of what I'm going to be talking about will be from that perspective and will help other members, but I really do feel that these principles can be helpful to just about anyone because that's what a principle is. It's true no matter what. And so, as you feel inspired, you might find that this can be helpful to someone even that is from a different Christian denomination or even not a Christian. And it can still be helpful because these principles are true regardless of which faith you happen to be a member of at this time. So, from President Nelson, what are we preparing for? I do believe this applies to more than just members of the church, but specifically it does apply to us as well. As I have stated before, the gathering of Israel is the most important work taking place on earth today. One crucial element of this gathering is preparing a people who are able, ready, and worthy to receive the Lord when he comes again. A people who have already chosen Jesus Christ over this fallen world, a people who rejoice in their agency to live the higher, holier laws of Jesus Christ. I call upon you, my dear brothers and sisters, to become this righteous people. Okay, so that's us. And how do we do this? We cherish and honor our covenants and let God prevail in our lives. And as we do that, he's promising us peace, confidence, joy, and even rest among all sorts of stresses and trials and things that are a part of being in the latter part of the latter days. So again, what are we preparing for? Right there. We are preparing a people who are ready, able, and worthy to receive the Lord when he comes again. So I don't think that means perfect, but I do believe there are specific things that we need to learn and need to be able and ready to do in order to be that people. And so these principles that we're going to be focusing on are going to guide us and help us become that kind of people so that when Christ does come, we recognize him, we're not deceived, and also he recognizes us because we've been doing his work. All right. Now, this channel is not going to teach us much about temporal preparation. I do believe temporal preparation is important, but that is not my focus here. That's not what I feel inspired to do. There's lots and lots of good information out there for you in order to be temporally prepared in these latter days. But what I feel inspired to do here is talk about two things. So we're going to split this into two series. The first is getting unstuck, because let's be honest, if you weren't already feeling stuck before COVID, you might now be feeling stuck after COVID. We're all still kind of recovering from what was a worldwide kind of trauma. And there are a lot of people that are just feeling bleh, right? They're just not quite sure what's next for them, what their purpose is, how to overcome some of these really challenging things that we're dealing with in our day, from addictions, mental illness, and just not progressing, right? So there's a whole handful of reasons why you might be feeling stuck. Trust me, you're not alone. I think this is a really common thing people are experiencing right now. So I felt like we need to talk about how to get unstuck. For myself, I've had some very poignant experiences with being stuck and getting unstuck. So I will share those, and I still deal with once in a while feeling stuck. And so these principles definitely have helped me and continue to help me, that I will be sharing in that series. And then the next series is we're going to talk about how to soar, right? Once we're unstuck, how do we then become this people that President Nelson is talking about? How do we become and meet our true potential, our full potential, right? And that is what we're going to talk about in the soar series. So we're really going to dig deep in the covenant path, what that means, and how do we meet that full potential that the Lord is telling us that we have and wanting us to become. So we're going to start with the very basics, because we don't talk about this a whole lot, although we use the word principle, we use it, but we might have forgotten what it means. So we'll just review it really quickly. Principles are truths that form the foundation of our system of beliefs. And we know, right? And we know from Christ's teachings, and of course the primary song about the building our house upon the rock and building our house upon the sand. And we know the importance of a strong foundation. What we might not know is when we go to then apply that, right? Obviously in the physical world, when we're building a house, we need a solid foundation. But when we go to apply that on our lives, we might not realize that we don't have a strong foundation. We might not understand that it's these principles that are what build that foundation. Of course, that includes Christ, right? But also some more specific truths. And if we don't have correct truths there, then that's going to form a faulty foundation. I really, really enjoy, so these numbers here in the parentheses, you're going to notice I have all my sources linked at the end of my videos, so I really encourage you guys to go check those out. Dig a little deeper. These videos are not going to be super long, and I do think it will benefit you to do some of your own personal study. And so I'm going to link all of that information that you can find. This video here where it says Masonry number 2 is awesome. In that his name's Todd McLaughlin, but he's talking about faith crises and why people are having faith crises and leaving the church. And he talks about that he thinks it's because they don't have a solid understanding of those foundational truths. And one of those specifically he goes into is baptism and what is really baptism mean. And it's an awesome video. So I encourage you to check that out. But for here, why I'm sharing it is because he talked about masonry and how he was trying to build a fireplace in his backyard. And it was his first time doing any kind of masonry work, and he didn't get the bricks completely level. And so several times he had to tear it all down and start over because he hadn't made sure that things were completely level. And if you don't with masonry, then it's not going to be stable and it's not going to work. So again, you've got to make sure that foundation is completely solid and stable and straight. Think of the straight and narrow path, right? It's got to be there and done correctly, or else there is that potential that we can fall. So another thing about principles, they are fixed truths. They don't change. Okay, we know God does not change. So anything that comes from God, He is all truth, right? All of those things, they don't change. Specific commandments can change, but these principles don't. And another thing about principles is they can be applied in any situation. Doesn't matter if I was born in Joseph Smith's day or Moses' day, or, it doesn't matter, because these principles hold true. Culture, other things like that, they're not going to affect truth. All right, from President Packer here. A principle is an enduring truth, a law, a rule you can adopt to guide you in making decisions. So that's what I like here. I'm not going to read everything from all of these quotes, but I encourage you to as you're going through this video, but I'm just going to point out a few things that I like. So they are guides for making decisions, these principles. They help us know what we should do and what we shouldn't do, and how really a principle is no good if we're not actually applying it in our lives, right? So just knowing it isn't enough. We need to apply it and use it to guide us in making decisions. And because of that, they're not going to be super detailed. Like I said before, they can be applied in any situation. This one from President Wilford Woodruff. I love that he says that if a principle has been revealed, right, this is by revelation from God, it cannot be annihilated. There is a lot of this going on in our world today where we're trying to rewrite morality, rewrite truth, and it simply just won't work. And this is a quote at the end of the presentation, but I'll just say it here now that if you go and see, right, if you go and actually do, you'll find that these kind of altered or rewritten principles that don't contain full truth, they're just not going to stand, right? They're not going to lead to the blessings that you're looking for. Here from Elder Scott, I like how he uses this analogy of principles are steel anchors, right? They are anchors of safety. So that's why I have this picture of this guy climbing. And that's what we're doing, right? We are all on our eternal journey of progression. And hopefully our goal is to make it back to be with God and to be as He is. That is a steep climb, right? So these principles really are there to keep us safe along that path. Make sure that we don't go free falling. These principles are also productive, right? They have an actual power to them, and you should see results. If they're true and you're acting on them, you should see results. And yeah, I just encourage you guys, as we're learning these, to seek ways to apply them as well. All right, Joseph Smith, this is really important, that he taught about that when he led and taught, he taught principles, and then he allowed people to choose for themselves, right? This is how God works. He provides, as prophets, he provides scriptures and things so we know what's true, and then he allows us agency, so we govern ourselves, right? We get to choose. And Joseph Smith also said here that the time is drawing near when the Lord is going to gather out His people from the wicked. Okay, so this is something has not happened yet, but it is supposed to happen before Christ comes again, right? This great sifting of the wheat and the tares. That's going to happen, and the principles which He has revealed and which Joseph Smith taught, they are going to be the principles and the truths that guide us and help us to be those righteous that are gathered out, right? Rather than the wicked. All right, so I'm a big fan of questions. I always have been. I consider myself a seeker, right? I've been curious. I just want to know everything and understand everything. I want to dig a little bit deeper, maybe than surface level. So far, that has served me really well, because when I've asked questions, I have sought the answers in the correct sources, right? So we're told that questions are good, but if we don't know where to look for answers, we can still feel stuck, right? We can either start looking in places where we get more confusing things, or there's a lot of rewriting of church history and things going on where now it's very confusing, right? We start looking in the wrong places and we're going to get confused, and it's not going to be helpful. So I love what Elder Bednar says. He said, we should not expect the church as an organization to teach or tell us everything we need to know. Okay, that is not the church's job. Do we know what the church's job is? And this is actually super helpful. something I learned as I've had questions in the last few years. What is the church's job? And that is what President Nelson keeps talking about, right? The gathering of Israel. The church's job is to make sure that the gospel is free to go to as many people as possible, and that we can share it with as many people as possible, and that temple ordinances can be available for as many people as possible. That is the church's job. So the other things that we maybe wish the church would do, that kind of falls on us, right? We get to go out and seek the truth and learn. And so here it says, we should not expect the church as an organization to teach or tell us everything we need to know and do to become devoted disciples and endure valiantly to the end. Rather, our personal responsibility is to learn what we should learn, to live as we know we should live, and to become who the Master would have us become. So, I wanted to finish that quote before I finished my previous thought, which is, if there's something we feel like the church should be doing differently, perhaps it falls on us to do it differently, right? If we feel like the church should be more loving, we should be more loving, right? And that's certainly in line with the Master's teachings. Or if we feel like the church should stand up for liberty, then we should stand up for that falls on us, right? Not on the church. The church is doing the work of salvation, and we should, of course, be a part of that and performing that as well. All right. And Bednar also said, this is probably my favorite, the answers are always in the doctrines and principles of the gospel. So, whatever your question is, whatever your concern, whatever you're feeling stuck about, whatever you're stressed out about, whatever, whatever, right? We all have our questions and our concerns, and that's normal and that's fine. But the answers are always in the doctrines and principles of the gospel. Always, always. And Packer here backs him up, right? Or actually, probably Bednar probably spoke after Packer. So Bednar backs up Elder Packer here. There's no question, personal or social or political or occupational, that need go unanswered. In the scriptures, we find principles of truth that will resolve any confusion and every problem and every dilemma that will face the human family or individual in it. I can testify that this is true. And we're going to talk about some steps so that we can get here, so that we get to the point where you can open up the scriptures and you can find those answers. Because I have been stuck, and I've been in a place where I open up the scriptures and I read them and I just didn't get it. So if that's where you're at right now, that's okay, right? That is sometimes part of feeling stuck in life. And you don't have to be there forever. We will get to the point where you can find those answers in the scriptures and in the words of the living prophets and past prophets, and it's there, okay? The truth is there. Sometimes we have to resolve a few other things before we get to this point, but I just want you to have that hope and know that you can find answers to your questions. What is power? All right, so we talked about we want principles that give us power. Power, I'm just going to define it really simply here. It's the ability to do something, right? God has the ultimate power because he can create worlds, right? He can create universes. He can create people. That's far greater than our electricity. Or here I have some dictators, right? So sometimes we think of power as political, government power. We might think of it as social power, like you're popular or you're rich or you're famous or you have influence. Okay, so there's that kind of power. There's this bottom picture is a picture of a light, because I've been studying light, and wow, there's just so much that we can do with light and that God can do with light. And that is certainly a form of power. All right, so the ability to act. Remember that. We're not going to dive into that today, but that is one of the principles we'll focus on, is our ability to act. So personal strength and power result from obedience to eternal principles taught by the living legates of the Lord. So this is a principle we'll have to get into, but that obedience really is essential. And when we are following these principles, right, we get the power. And here, Elder Christofferson teaches us, where do we get our moral and spiritual power, right? It comes from God. And how do we access it? It's through our covenants. So we can't have a conversation about power without talking about covenants, because absolutely, we ourselves as humans are not all that powerful, but God is. And when we fulfill our part of the covenant, which ultimately is what he asks of us, is just so minimal in comparison to what he offers us, right? Including this power. So covenants are an essential element of understanding and accessing God's power. And our desires are important as well, because what our desires are going to influence what kind of power we seek, right? We can't really hide from our desires. Ultimately, our desires are going to manifest. So we may need to do some examining of our desires and figure out if there's something that needs to be changed there. So, for example, if it's cold and I want to be warm, what kind of power will I seek? Right? Something that can give me warmth. Firewood, electricity, something like that. But if my struggle is with emotional or physical pain, what kind of power am I going to seek? Something that will provide relief, right? Now, the ultimate desire that we want to get to, and it's okay if we're not here yet, but the ultimate desire is, if I want to be as God is, I'll seek to make and keep the covenants that will provide the necessary power to change and redeem me until I am as he is. So Abraham had this desire. We learn in the book of Abraham that he did not come from the best upbringing. So if you're in kind of a messy situation like Abraham was, right, his father was trying to sacrifice him to an idol. So if you're in a messy situation, just know that doesn't define you. It didn't define Abraham, right? He wanted something more. And like President Kimball over here says, he did not wait for God to come to him. He sought his appointment to the priesthood, right? And that priesthood is essential for those covenants, right? So he sought that. He worked for it. And what we are charged with is to go and do the works of Abraham. So do likewise, right? We are going to seek those same blessings of the fathers, that same covenant relationship that ultimately allows us to be transformed to where we can be as God is. Alma, it encourages us in the same way, right? Even if the best that you can do, right, you have all sorts of desires, and the most, that you can do is just desire to believe, right? Exercise a particle of faith and desire to believe. That is where we start, right? So that might be where we're at today. Okay, maybe what this lady on this YouTube video is saying, maybe there's something to it, right? Maybe I can give place for these principles to work in me and change me. And this desire to believe and awaking, I really, really feel like this word awake is important right now. The world around us is just so visible and so loud, and it seems so real, and it seems like the only thing. But there's so much more, and we have to awaken to God's ways, right? If we want to be God's people, we have to awaken to his ways and what he's trying to teach us and what he's trying to prepare us for. And as we do that, our desires are going to shift, right? They're going to change. So for right now, just think about that word awake. Maybe it means something to you. Maybe you feel like you have already awoken to something. Maybe it doesn't mean anything yet, but I promise you it will along this journey, right? One of the things we're going to have to do is awake. and have a desire to believe. I love this from President Nelson. When you reach up for the Lord's power in your life with the same intensity that a drowning person has when grasping and gasping for air, power from Jesus Christ will be yours. Right? Oh my goodness. How many of you feel like you're drowning or know someone who feels like they're drowning? A lot, right? This is a thing. This is a time that we're going through when people are struggling. Maybe you've had a time in the past when you felt like you were drowning. Maybe you were able to reach for Christ. Maybe you weren't, right? I have felt this, right? When I was drowning, it wasn't like an immediate take everything away, right? No more pain, no more struggle. But some of my most sacred moments were in these drowning times and when I could not doubt that Christ was there. So I know that you can feel that as well, wherever you're at. And the next step is, right, when you reach for him, he will reach for you and you will be led by the Holy Ghost to know exactly what you should do. That's super important. That's one of the principles we're going to have to talk about. What will this channel look like? All right. The format. I'm going to share a principle. Each video will be one principle. Then I'll share an example. It could be from my own life, the scriptures, something to make this a little bit more real. And lastly, a commitment. Because what I'm learning is we know a lot, right? We know a lot of the gospel. We don't always know how to apply it. Therefore, any good teacher is going to offer you a commitment because when you can take what you've learned and then you go act on it, that is when the miracles happen. That's when you change. Just knowing something is not the same as knowing it, right? Knowing it to the point where you cannot deny it because you have actually seen the miracle or the change happen. And that's what I want for you. I want you to be able to say, this actually did influence me for good. This actually changed something for the better in my life and helped me progress. Okay? So without the commitment, it's not going to work. It just won't. I know. We just want it to, but it won't. Okay? So please, please, please take the commitments. This video is going to be a little bit longer just because I want to make sure that we all kind of understand what's going on here. But then the general idea is to have the videos be kind of short so that you have time to pray, ponder, and go and do the things that we've talked about. Last thing before we go. I ask you to do two things. Okay, we kind of already talked about this, but something that I noticed, like I said before, I am somebody that just likes to dig deep. That comes naturally for me. It doesn't come naturally for everyone. I know that, right? So if it doesn't come naturally to you, I am asking you to stretch yourself a little bit here and actually take the time to ponder, think deeply about these principles, wrestle with them if you need to, right? Figure it out so that it makes sense to you. Pray and ponder until you understand them. Okay, this is a principle we'll talk about, but we really need to have both the heart and the mind on the same page. We really do, so that understanding is in the heart. When the mind and the heart are in sync, you've received personal revelation. And that is the goal. Don't just trust what I say, right? I'm just a person. I could be wrong. And I probably will make a few mistakes in here. But the point is that you can receive your own revelation. That's what President Nelson is directing us to do, to learn how to do that. So stretch yourself. Really think and understand mind and heart until you get your answer, right? And then don't be surprised if you have to go and do before you get your full answer, right? Understanding won't come until you do something like Christ instructed us, that try me and see, right? If you want to know if my teachings are true, go and do them and see the fruit, and then you'll know, right? So that's how Christ instructed us. That's how I'm instructing you. You're probably going to have to act, right? So number 2 is act. I talked about my commitments. I just want to testify that I know that as you take the commitments, that you will see change happening in your life. And that's not because I'm so smart or I know so much. I'm really not. But the Lord has taught me, and many other people have taught me these principles, and they work because they are based on the doctrine of Christ. And that is where the power comes from, right? The power comes from Him. His doctrine, His covenants, His teachings. Those are the things that have the power to change you and to help you and to save you, right? Wherever you're at. If we desire Him and seek Him, His power will be ours, and we will live to experience the rest President Nelson has promised us. I can testify, I know that's true. All right, one last story. So what I'm going to do here at the end of the videos is leave this open so you can kind of look through the sources in case you wanted to go read through them yourself. I'm also going to try to link the slides in the video if I can, so that you can have these links readily available and so you can share the slides. And one last story before we go. I remember I was a teenager at the time and I lived in Utah, and the Ochre Mountain Temple was being built and dedicated. So I was old enough to drive, and I don't remember exactly why, but for some reason I was given the responsibility of taking my younger sisters to the dedication, which was at the stake center nearby. And we could watch it, I guess, participate in that from our stake center. So we go, and my family, we just struggle to be on time. It's the curse. We call it the curse because we try so hard, but we just really struggle to be on time. So of course, I was a couple of minutes late, and I show up, and the doors are locked. And you guys, this is like a once in a lifetime. I guess if you live in Utah, it might be more than once in a lifetime. But for me, this is the only temple dedication I've had the opportunity to attend, and I was locked out. And at that time, the Lord, this is how the Lord works, right? He teaches us lessons. And sometimes He teaches them like years in advance of when we're going to need them. It's amazing. It's only been recently that this story has really come to mean something to me in a way that I understand, I guess, more deeply. But I was locked out, right? I couldn't get in because I was late. And I really just felt like I needed to share this story with you guys, that we don't want to be late, right? And this isn't me trying to tell you I know exactly when Christ will be here. I don't, right? We just know, like the parable of the fig tree, right? When we start to see the signs, when we start to see leaves on the fig tree, we know summer's coming. When we start to see the signs, we know it's getting closer. And so certainly we're seeing signs more and more every day, and being warned by our church leaders as well to be prepared. And so I just know for myself, as someone who is still struggling with being late, this is something that I do not want to be late for, right? I want to be ready. I want to be there when He comes, and I want to be worthy and ready and able to be with Him. I hope that same thing for all of you and for everyone, right? That we can do what our prophet's asking us to do, right? And that's going to require some work. He didn't spell it out for us. He didn't tell us this is exactly what you have to do. He's given us a lot of instructions, and we're going to talk about a lot of what President Nelson teaches, because obviously he's preparing us, right? I just know I don't want to be late, right? I want to be there. And I know that we can be. We can be. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.